Okay, so my name's Christie Dustman. I have a landscape design and maintenance company, and today we're going to talk about watering. It seems like it should be very obvious, but I hope that you pick up a few tips as we talk about how to apply water to a garden or a lawn. Is it really so obvious? So we're going to talk about watering. So when I turn on the hose, obviously this is the flow that is coming out of the hose. And if I was to just let this go directly on a plant, you see that I'm potentially bruising the leaves of the plant. So you have an option of putting some sort of attachment on the end of the hose or stepping on the hose. Oh, there we go. You have an option of putting something on the hose to make it come out as a spray, or what more often what I do is I'll just use my thumb, and this may seem totally obvious, but by using my thumb, I can create that spray such that it's more of a gentle rain on the plant. So when I'm watering, and you'll see in our other tutorials, one of my goals is that I never want the water to run away from the plant. The goal is to get the water to the plant and have it go absorb into the ground so that the roots of the plant can take it up. So if I just was to stand here for a full minute, letting this water go on these Brennera here, eventually the water is going to start running off. So what I typically do is I'll more think of it as an area. So I might do, say, 5 seconds on this guy, 5, 6 seconds on these guys, then move over to this, move over to this, move over to this, then go back through the plants, because what I find is that then that allows the water to go down, and once there's some water down into the ground, there's a specific term for that I can't think of right now, but it does actually pull the water down into the soil, as opposed to being hydrophobic, which is the opposite of that, where water actually will shed from really dry soil. There's a capillary action that starts. So when I'm watering, like I said, as opposed to thinking about just holding it on one plant indefinitely, I will kind of move my way through the bed, do an area, and then move on to the next area. With larger plants, I do something that's called deep watering. And what that means is I will literally put a hose at the base of the plant and let it run for a certain period of time. And what I want to show you is that this obviously is too much water pressure to put at the base of a plant. You can see that it would just literally all run off. So I'm going to go turn the water pressure down. So this is what I would call a low trickle. And I'm trying to show that the water is coming out, but it really is just a very low trickle. It could even be a little bit lower than this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the trunk of the tree or the shrub or the evergreen, and I'm literally going to put the hose at the base of the tree. So right here I have it actually up on the tree flare, so that the water is just running down, and what my aim is for the water to be able to be absorbed into the soil as quickly as it's coming out of the hose. So as opposed to it running away. Now, why do I do this? I do deep watering on larger trees, shrubs, and evergreens as a way of really getting a significant amount of water down into the root area of the plant. And I will leave this trickle on this guy for maybe a half hour. So for me, I don't wear a watch. Some people might use a watch or their phone, but what I'll do is I'll set the kitchen timer for a half an hour, because I have been known to deep water things for 24 hours, which is not ideal. So I can't seem to remember it, so I just set the timer. And so after a half an hour, then I would come out and I'd move to the next plant. Now you can see that it's such a low trickle that it's going to take a minute for it to fill up. So I'd let it run probably another half hour, maybe 45 minutes on this Chamaecyparis. Now sometimes when the plant is so large, or if you have a large tree, I might actually do a half an hour on one side of the tree, then go around on the other side and do a half an hour on the other side of the tree, such that I'm getting water to both sides of the root system. With the kind of drought that we're having, like say you have a large beech tree, or you have a large oak or a maple tree, something, really quite large caliper, it probably is recommended to do some deep watering maybe once a week if we're in a period of mild to higher drought. And that brings us to the topic of how much water is enough for a plant. So there's the inevitable question of how much water is enough. The plants unfortunately can't tell us if they're thirsty or not. They can wilt, but it's always my goal to deliver enough water, not too much and not too little. So there is a rule of thumb that plants and lawns would like to have 1 inch of water per week. So I brought 2 containers here. One, this is a tuna can. I just opened the tuna. And this just is a curved bowl. Now, if I fill the tuna can up, that would be 1 inch of water. If I use something with a curved side, by the time I have an inch measurement in the center of the bowl, I have a lot more extra water that has also been delivered above and beyond that inch. So the point here is that, and we're going to talk about how to use the can and how to, in what ways you would use this can to measure. But you want to use a straight-sided container to be able to take an accurate measurement of that 1 inch. So what I'm going to demonstrate now or talk about is how to measure how long you need to let the water run on either some sort of a sprinkler apparatus, or how long to have a zone of your irrigation run. Because, this hose right now, I have it bent in half to stop the water from totally soaking me while I'm talking to you. But, there's variability in the water pressure. There's variability in the hose. There's variability in, the water getting up through into this particular sprinkler apparatus. When you think about your irrigation system, you know, how long is the hose? What's your water pressure like? It's totally unique to each zone, each apparatus, each house. So the best way to try to have at least some independent information, some verifiable information, is to measure how long do I have to run this and before I get an inch of water. And then that will help me know that when I move it to the next part of the garden, I know that it takes roughly 40 minutes when I turn the hose on, at a pretty good clip to get an inch. Or it might be that it only takes 20 minutes or, whatever. So I'm going to take my tuna can, I'm going to put it down here, and I'm going to let go of the hose and run away. But another thing that I want to say is that there's also variability, like with this is a whirligig. So it may actually be that more water gets distributed on the outside of the circle than in the middle. So it's never going to be totally scientific, but at least I can exercise some intelligence and not over or underwater in a dramatic fashion. So I'm going to let this go and run off the screen. Okay. So let's just say that I come after I've watered and say I have not actually done the scientific method, and I look at this part of the garden where I've had the whirligig going. There's water dripping off the plants, there's water on the leaves. I have this very self-satisfied feeling that I've done a good deed, I've watered the plants, and I might just think that that's good enough. But I have been tricked many, many times by this. So what I want to illustrate, and another reason to think about the 1 inch of water, is once I move, for me I use pine needles, and we did have rain here yesterday, so this may or may not be totally illustrative, but the point is that I may be fooled by how moist everything looks. So what we're really trying to do is, and I'm not suggesting that you come out every time and dig a hole in your garden, but the 1 inch of water, generally a week, the goal is to moisten the soil down, say 6 inches for a perennial garden, 6 to 8 to 10 inches. Now, you may be able to see in this hole that the soil is pretty moist. You see how it's sticking together. So I think that is a measure of the rain that we received yesterday, but time and again, I have, encountered, or clients encounter, what looks like a well-watered area. They pull aside the mulch and it's bone dry. So that's why you can't just rely on what you visually see. You have to actually investigate by looking to see how effective has the watering actually been. And I will now relate this back to the irrigation system, in that there's 2 kinds of irrigation, right? There's the pop-ups that spray, that you would use the tuna can for, but then many people have the drip irrigation, which just allows water to seep out and soak into the soil. So how do you know if that kind of, how do you know how long to run that kind of irrigation? The way to know is you run a drip irrigation zone for, let's just say you have it set for 20 minutes. Then you would come out and do exactly what we're doing right now, which is that you would make a couple of test holes, ideally not puncturing the drip irrigation lines, but you would do a couple of test holes to see when you let it run for 20 minutes, did it actually moisten the soil down 6-8 inches? If it did not, then you know, say it only moistened 2, well then you probably have to triple the time of that zone being on to get the water penetration that the plants need. The reason that we care is that if this is the soil level, the top couple of inches of soil are the first to dry out. They're also the part of the soil that is most prone to heating up, cooling off. It's the most vulnerable to environmental conditions. So if you think about what's going to help a plant survive and be able to have resilience in, drought conditions, the most resilient plants are going to be the ones whose roots know enough and have developed growing down deep, because those roots are not going to be as vulnerable to drying out or getting hot as if the roots stayed just in that top surface layer. So if you're watering only a little bit and only moistening a couple of inches at the top, the roots are not stupid. They're not going to go way down. They're going to stay and get all of the yummies right up here. But if you water infrequently but deeply, they're going to learn to follow the water. So as part of having a more sustainable garden, you want to train your plants and your grass to go deep rather than staying at the surface. And you heard me maybe say the word infrequent. So, so many times I see people program their irrigation systems to go on every day, because we think that plants are like, kids or ourselves. We like to eat and drink every day. But in fact, it is proven that it is better to have deep, infrequent watering rather than shallow, frequent watering. So most of the time with an irrigation system, I would say that you'd only deliver 1 inch of water a week in shady to part shade areas. You might do 2 inches 2 different days for really sunny spots. But like my plants here in a more established setting, I would say just cope with 1 inch of water a week. So I wanted to speak for a minute about too much kindness. So it seems hard to imagine that we could be too kind to our plants, but in fact, it is possible to overwater a plant. So what happens when we do that? When too much water is in the soil and it can't drain away, and it's just being held in the soil, or it never has time to totally drain out before you water again, what ends up happening is all of the little air holes in the soil structure get filled with moisture. And if we were to look at a recipe for soil, one of the ingredients is air. Now, why? Well, when the roots go down into the soil, they're basically respirating. They're taking in and giving off gases. So if there is no air pockets, no air in the soil at all, it's all wet, like basically being in a bathtub, it's going to suffocate. It's not going to be able to do that gas exchange. So when I talk to people about watering, I say to them that you want the soil to be moist, but you don't want it to be muddy. You don't want it to be mucky. You don't want it to be fully saturated such that it seems like it's holding, it's too wet. We want to moisten the soil, let it drain, but not be muddy. So thank you for listening about watering. I'm sure we'll get a few questions and perhaps we'll be able to come back with a few more tips. But watering is something that just seems like it should be, like you come out of the womb and you understand how to water a garden. But in fact, there really are some key things to understand to make your use of this very important resource more productive, efficient, and helpful to the plants. Thank you.